Welcome, everyone. On this beautiful sunny morning, I know people talk about talking about the weather is, superficial way to engage with people, but they don't live in our part of the state. The weather means a lot to us here. And so when it's a sunshiny day with blue skies, like we care about it. In any case, thanks for joining us here this morning. I'm Monica Brown. I am a senior program officer here at the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, and I work within the responsive grants investment area. I also have my colleague Hannah Stark here, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Hannah Stark. I am one of the associate program officers at the Health Foundation, primarily working in the responsive side of things with Monica. So glad to be here.
Yeah, the two of us are, two of the primary folks that you would be interacting with as it pertains to the responsive investment area. But we like to say, really, connect with whoever you know at the foundation. And if there's somebody else that's more appropriate for you to be connected to, we would do that. So don't feel like you have to know the right person to connect with to reach out to us. Also, our colleague Christine Feeney is here with us, but not visual. But she is here in the background holding down the technical aspects of our call here today. So we want to recognize her and say hello. And she's given us a thumbs up. Thank you, Christine, for supporting us on the call today. We are happy to be here to do a Q&A for our 2021 responsive grants call for ideas. Many of you on the call today are current or past partners of us, may even be more familiar with the responsive grants work through community health grants and opportunity grants. Some of you, because this is not your first time attending one of these, knows that in 2021, we sort of revamped our offering in responsive and sort of brought those two together and created what we have now, which is our call for ideas, which is a grant opportunity for organizations of all sizes, right? We used to have two different offerings based on organizational size, but this is available to all organizations. Also, what's important in that shift is to sort of, if you've partnered with us in the past or are currently partners of ours, to sort of think about this very differently and don't rely on anything that you might have known about the way in which we worked previously. And recognize that we are actively and purposely looking to engage in different ways. Also, a technical piece that I want to talk about is that we are going to be recording, which we have started. Hopefully everyone on the call is okay with that. If you aren't, you can feel free to, take yourself off camera, and or if you did have to leave, know that we will be posting this. That's why we're recording it. And we'll also be posting a written version of the questions and answers as well. So you don't necessarily have to listen to the full recording to get the, technical aspects of information we're gonna share today. Also, for safety purposes, we don't expect it, but if we do have anyone who, is coming in looking to create trouble, Christine is going to handle that, which might mean that she will discontinue the Zoom meeting if that were to happen and we are not able to rejoin. Please do not worry. We will still make sure all questions are answered and we'll provide you the information that you're looking for. We just rather be safe than sorry, because unfortunately these kinds of things are happening. There are many of us on the call today, so we're going to ask that everyone stays muted. I also know we're going to be controlling that, and we will allow for there to be an open Q&A portion of this, but of course, feel free to put any question that you might have or communication in the chat box. We also ask for attendance purposes. If everyone in the chat box can put your name and organization, so that way we have an idea of who was with us today. Also, give you an idea of what will happen in the next 2 hours. The idea is that the first hour will be spent answering questions that are more generalizable, right? The kinds of questions that everybody might be interested in having the answers to. Quite a few folks even gave us some questions ahead of time. We asked if you had something in particular you were looking to get answered. We've, compiled those. We also have some questions that we received in 2020 that we're going to be using because we know that they're important pieces of points of information, and we'll answer those first and then open up for more general questions. That's going to be the first half of our time today. The second half of our time today, and this is something that we've added on this time, is that we're going to also have a more open, broad conversation where people can ask questions about their specific organization or ideas that may be very individualized, which is a little bit closer to what we used to do in our workshops that we hosted for our community health grants. Folks would have an opportunity to ask questions about something in particular that they were wondering about in reference to their idea. And one of the great things about being able to do that in a group is that even if you don't have a question about yours, you might learn something from a question that somebody else asks about their specific organization's information or idea. But we are holding those kinds of questions off to the second half, since they will be a little bit more tailored. I've shared with you that you're able to put questions in the chat box. When we move to that section of open questions, you can also feel free to do a hand raise. Hand is going to help us navigate and facilitate the open Q&A period. And also, if you want to send a question to our ideas at the grhf.org email address, you can feel free to send a question there as well. But please know that those questions will not be answered until after the Q&A session today. So before I move on to answering the questions, I want to take a few moments to just provide a very brief and high level overview of the foundation. As I mentioned, for some folks here today, this is not your first time interacting with the foundation. And for many folks here today, this may be your first introduction to the foundation. And so we just wanted to provide a little bit of information for you. Do you mind going to the second slide? Thanks. So important to especially the project, the offering we have here today, is the mission of the foundation, because it really does encapsulate what you will see as the focus and drive behind the Call for Ideas proposal, and that's to pursue and invest in solutions that build a healthier region where people can thrive. Hence the reason why when you see in the proposal guidelines, we talk about adoption of and belief in the World Health Organization's definition of health, right? A social determinants definition that includes health from a physical, social, and emotional perspective, right? So from all the components. In addition to that, that really does connect us to the areas that we value, right? And what is our sort of our guiding principles of equity, partnership, innovation, integrity, and stewardship. You will see throughout the proposal that Equity is an important factor in how we are looking at our investment. We know even prior to the pandemic that equity has played a destructive role in allowing for folks to have parity and equal access to supports that are needed to allow for them to be healthy, but also to thrive. And so our investment, it's really important to us that we are taking a look at populations and neighborhoods and situations where that is not happening, where the equity is not taking place. Partnership is something that's also very important to us, taking a look at how are we working together, not only as it pertains to community, but even within one another in terms of the community organizations that are serving. Also innovation, not necessarily innovation because we're looking for things to be recreated, but innovation from a perspective, if we see something that's not working, that we're not getting and seeing the results and the impact that is needed to improve conditions, then that really calls us to say, what do we need to do differently? How are we working together to really solve for um, or move towards solutions and solve the problems that we need to address? And the other piece that I want to really emphasize are the 9 county um, region that we invest within. We focus on Yates, Orleans, Wayne, Genesee, Wyoming, Monroe, Livingston, Ontario, and Seneca counties. I say that because that's our investment region, and that's where our funding gets focused. That doesn't mean that we don't care for the health and well-being of folks that live outside of those counties. And we do know and hope that in indirect and direct ways that our work has a even broader spread um, indirectly, but those would be the counties that we fund within. Is there anything else, Hannah, that I maybe didn't mention in a high level overview that you would think would be important to share?
No, not at the moment. I think you covered it.
Yeah, like I said, this is very high level. We'd be happy to have a more detailed conversation about our work. You can just reach out to us. So, with that said, I am going to go into the questions that we did get ahead of time. I will share this is one of my least favorite things to just have to talk at folks, but since these are mainly the questions that were asked ahead of time, hopefully it can keep your attention, and then, soon enough we can shift to a more conversational exchange, and then the second part will be hopefully full of um, dialogue between us, and I'm not just going to be a talking head. I've put them in several categories. The first I called the types of projects, right? So there were several questions that spoke to that were asking about the types of projects that we were interested in it and would be acceptable. And I will share um, much of what I'm going to be talking about today can also be responses to that, and information about it can also be found within the call for ideas proposal guideline document that you have. And really, when you start to think about the kinds of programs that we're looking to fund, pages 1 and 2 that talk about our focus and what we fund will provide more details. However, I will say, really, what we are looking to fund, the largest and most important guidelines are primary things. One, we are looking to fund and support programs that address health and equity. Health from the broad spectrum that I talked about a moment ago, from a social determinants, social, emotional, and physical health perspective. what types of programs we would be looking for, really, that's what we are asking you to answer, right? In responsive, we are not dictating the population, the geography, the issue, the opportunity. We're asking for you to highlight that and have that information within the proposal, sharing with us why and how this is an area, issue, opportunity that needs to be addressed, right? Like, what has the community spoken to? What have you learned through your years of being a provider? What is research shared? How are all those things coming together to form the thought, idea, and then proposed, solution to address that you are moving forward? So we've had people even say, like, oh, would you prefer something more clinical or something that is more service in nature? And we always say we don't prefer, our only preference is that you are highlighting that need, you are including community in your design and delivery, and that you are really deepening your focus from an equity lens. So the other piece around that is, um, regarding not necessarily only type, but the kind of grant. Folks wanted to know, can a grant be used to extend a currently successful program? Absolutely, especially if you're able to identify why that additional funding is needed, what it might do to have a deeper penetration, a broader spread. Why is it something that is successful, but that you're now not going to be able to continue funding? This is a big one here because it's an important one. Can you address two intersecting issues such as food insecurity and housing? The answer to that is absolutely, and it's something that we would expect to see, right? Because those who really understand issues of equity, we know that they're intersecting. So, yes, you have to look at it from, not only does an issue or population deal with inequity, but what are the other compounding factors? So you might say, we focus on folks that are impacted by poverty. If you dig deeper into that and say folks that are impacted by poverty, who are of color, who are migrant workers, right? Like, that's another way of showing that you are recognizing what could be not only intersecting issues of oppression, but also what might be compounding factors that just increase issues of inequity and challenge access, challenge, um, have challenges around systematic and institutional, racism or oppression attached to it, that your project, program, or idea might be looking to address. So we would say absolutely. If you are looking at an issue that has intersectionality, we would really want to see your recognition of that and that you're looking to address it from that perspective. Is this an opportunity that's open to neighborhood organizations and smaller organizations? I sort of spoke to that very briefly in the first part of my introductions, but absolutely, we are looking to work with organizations and agencies and entities of a variety of sizes, um, purposes, and um, everything from organizations that maybe are grassroots to your larger organizations that have maybe been around for years to newer nonprofits that may be in existence. Can an organization submit more than one idea? There is nothing that says that an organization can not submit more than one idea, but we encourage that you really think about that, because submitting more than one idea does not increase chances or likelihood of invitation to stage two or to a recommendation. And it would be important that for anything you're looking to move forward, any proposal you're looking to submit, that you really think about the project, although you may see that there are many different areas of need, which area is really primed and ready and positioned to be brought forward now, right? What's the readiness? How much work has been done around co-design and co-creation with community? What is really the issue opportunity that is most and well positioned to be brought forward? So that's what we're really asking folks to think about. And if you have any questions regarding that, give us a call, because you might be thinking your idea or your needs are different and separate, and they might not be, right? And so we might be able to share with you a way in which you can think about your ask, your proposal, your opportunity from a different perspective. So please feel free to give us a call about that. Talking a little bit about what we refer to as our community engagement, co-design, co-creation aspect that is really of emphasis for us in the investment that we're looking to make. Sharing the health aspect, I should have said there were three really important pieces. There's the health aspect, the equity aspect, and the co-design, co-creation aspect. That those three things are very important to how we are hoping and wanting to see um, our community partners be in concert with the community, right? We want to make sure that not only are the proposals, the thoughts, the ideas, opportunities are being driven by what our community partners see, but that they are truly um, opportunities, challenges that have been identified in partnership with community, and the solutions are co-designed with the community, which is one of the reasons why we have quite an emphasis in the questions around that aspect of it, because it's such an important piece. We believe strongly that that structure, that emphasis is really the best pathway to allowing for us to see the change, the improvement, the outcomes that we all are hoping to see in terms of improvement around community needs and folks being able to thrive. So when you ask, what do we mean by client feedback, that's really what we're talking about. Not only just um, a survey or a focus group, because that's one layer of client feedback and engagement, but the most rich, meaningful ways in which we engage is when folks are included at the table, helping to think through, identify, and, you know, come up with ideas and solutions, as well as continuing to be at the table even during implementation and continued change. And so really that's what we're moving towards and driving towards. And there are a variety of ways in which you can get to that, which is why we supplied some support materials within the document. We have linkage to a roadmap, and we also have some support materials around human-centered design. And we also, in fact, are offering on the 21st hour-and-a-half workshop on human-centered design. These are all our ways to, all of our attempts actually to provide some additional tools for folks to be able to utilize to drive towards the co-design, co-creation, and really drilling into understanding what the needs are, what the opportunities are, and what the approaches can be within the projects. So I would say, if you have any question around whether or not what you are currently doing, if there is opportunity to sort of deepen that co-creation, that connection, that shared um, that table sharing with community, please feel free to reach out and give us a call, and we can even connect you to additional resources, and we can also share some additional thoughts. demographics, one of the questions that folks had was, is it okay to estimate the demographics of the populations you serve? And, we recognize that everybody has a different way in which they might um, identify their population, track their connection and their services and intakes for folks. We do ask that, yes, some folks may have very specific, detailed documentation of that, while others might have more informal information. That's okay, except I would say that it would be important, if you are using informal information, that you have a basis for how and why that information is accurate, right? Like, you might not formally ask folks race, um, zip code, etc., but you might have a sense of those things because, we know that most folks who come to our center come because it's closely located and they walk here. So we have a sense that most people are coming from this area, this zip code, or we informally ask folks questions that allow for us to have an understanding of who we're serving. But we don't ask those things formally because we want people to feel comfortable and as if they don't have to necessarily divulge too much information. So I would say, don't hesitate, if you don't have that information formally, to still know and understand that you might have a good understanding of who you're serving, and to share that information as you know it. Funded parameters. What counties do you fund? I did share those 9 counties. They're also in the proposal guidelines. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Folks wanted to know, can you reach beyond one county? Absolutely. It's a wonderful opportunity of investment when you have organizations that are doing work across multiple counties. In addition, folks wanted to know, what if a project focuses in one county we fund and one county we do not? So if that is the case, because we understand that, borders are only borders in our world, not necessarily in the world in service delivery and in need, that we would say that the project, proposal, service that you're looking to ask us to fund should be focused on and within the county that we fund. However, of course, if there is supplemental benefit beyond that, that is something that is just a bonus, but the focus and what you would be bringing to us would be about the counties that we support. And once again, if you have any questions about what that looks like for your specific project, feel free to reach out and we can, walk through that with you. Can funding support general operating costs? Yes, it can. Um, if there's a specific project or organization, we can sort of talk through when and how that is appropriate. What don't we fund? We don't fund capital only projects or construction only projects. Can you have 2 leads on a project? We strongly encourage and support partnerships. However, when you speak to leads, if you're referring to who would then um, be ensuring that you are connected to our portal and that you are registered for the portal and submitting of the proposal and the budget information and all contractual information, there has to only be one organization that does that. Although you could have 2 organizations that are working on the project equally, only one of those organizations is actually going to be the primary contact, conduit, etc., for all communications. Can coalitions, not individual organizations, apply? Absolutely. Once again, whether formally or informally, really none of this work can be done unless we are working in partnership with one another. So, if a coalition is formally working together and would like to apply, absolutely. Once again, it depends on if the coalition in and of itself is an entity, and that entity can apply individually on behalf or because of on behalf of the coalition members, or if one coalition member then becomes who will be the representative for the coalition as a whole. Can GRHF requested fund resources be used to pay support community members during the development of the proposal? So, unfortunately, whereas those kinds of things are aspects that we support, we wouldn't be able to support it in the development of the proposal process because funding decisions haven't been made during that time. And so we wouldn't be able to promise any kind of funds retroactively. However, when you talk about this from a proposal idea design perspective, these kinds of aspects are absolutely the types of things that our resources can be used towards supporting community members' contribution, stipends, childcare, transportation. Absolutely, those are the kinds of resources that you can think about requesting funding for within your idea proposal. Would a new program or organization be considered? Absolutely. You just have to be a nonprofit, as we shared initially, that we are looking to work with smaller organizations, larger organizations, and everything in between, grassroots organizations that are institutions now because they've been around a long time. We are open to all partners because we know that opportunities for really moving forward and making some shifts and changes and improving conditions, there are lots of organizations that are poised and positioned to be able to do that. Some are newer, some are unknown to us, and some may be organizations that are more familiar. So we are open to all. And someone wanted to know then, based on a newness of an organization, or maybe the first time an organization might be submitting something to us, what's the chances of being funded? And honestly, that's not a question that we are able to answer outright because our investment strategy has as much of an equity focus to it as what we are talking about and encouraging you to be thinking about in the development or identification of your idea. So when we are reviewing with the team of reviewers that includes internal folks here at the foundation and external folks, we are looking at selection from an equity perspective as well. So we too are taking a look at, where have we then touched across our 9 counties, or maybe we haven't. What are populations that we might not have funded before? What are opportunities that we might not have invested in before? So really, there isn't anything specific based on being a newer organization and a newer organization that may be less known, or an older organization that is more known, that definitively speaks to the likelihood of funding. This is a similarly related question. What elements of the proposal are weighted most heavily? And I would say that we don't have elements that are weighted more heavily. However, I will share that we have a strong emphasis in regards to health, equity, and co-design, right? And in community inclusion in design. So in terms of weighted heavily, all of those things are equally important, but ensuring that your proposal really has um, demonstrated all three of those areas would then increase its competitiveness, right? And so it's one of the reasons why I have to look at the page. I think it's page 4. I don't know my pages by heart. Actually, page 3, we even shared selection considerations with you so you have a sense of what are the kinds of things that we're looking for when the proposals are being reviewed. And this is the last question that came in ahead of time that we have to share with you, and that is, what is the range of funding? So we provided what we call, you know, what may be a potential average, right? Anywhere from $25,000 to $500,000, anywhere from a year to 5 years. And those, I know in certain ways they seem like really broad parameters that are difficult to then say, what should I ask for? And the reason for that is it's not necessarily what should I ask for based on what we are saying we're looking to offer. What you should ask for should be based on what is actually needed to address the need, to move forward the idea, the opportunity that you are presenting to us, right? And so the budget that you're asking for, the amount of time you're asking for, should relate to that. If you're asking for a year, um, why the year, right? It could be because you need that year's support because after that, there's something that's secured, or what you're looking to do, you understand will only take a year. If you're asking for 3 years, similarly, you want 3 years because that's how long you estimate it will take for you to support the penetration of and impact of fill in the blank. So your requested amount of funds as well as the period of time should very much so be um, connected to the proposal, the idea, the need that you are bringing forward. So as I shared, those were all the questions that were submitted. And I haven't been tracking. I assume Hannah has. And are there any additional questions that have come through in our chat?
I have a couple of additional questions, and then please continue. If there's something on your mind that we haven't answered yet, yep, please feel free to share them, raise your hand. Yeah, either way, whatever you're comfortable with. But in the meantime, if you are a current grantee, or if you receive the Call for Ideas grant, does that eliminate you from receiving other GRHF grants?
No, it does not.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have a specific dollar amount assigned to this initiative? How much do you have to give out in this opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, sorry for the reverb. With this particular, sorry for the pause. You didn't throw me for a loop, but I'm pausing here because it's easier for me to say the estimated number of grants we are expecting to provide, because the amount of funding that we have to give out this year, if I give it to you in that number, it would skew the idea of how much funding is actually going out, because funding requests may come in for 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. So I would say we are looking in this cycle we estimate that we would be giving out 10 to 15 grants. Now, that is an estimate, and that will largely depend on the requests that come in, the period of time, the amounts that are asked, and which of those are recommended for funding. But that gives you a sense of the number. And to further, um, you know, add context to this question, really of just trying to understand the competitiveness, the what's the opportunity like. In our last cycle, we received 75 proposals, and we've provided 12 grants. Now, I don't know the number of proposals that will come in during this cycle, right? So I don't know what number that will be, but having the experience from the other cycles, still that 10 to 15 range is where we're estimating, but we won't know specifically until we get all the proposals in and review them um, carefully. And we spend a lot of time doing that, as well as taking a look at what the full picture of potential recommendations looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Something you said, I just want to clarify.
Please do.
Your project can be anywhere between 1 and 5. It is okay if it's 2 years or 4 years. I didn't want there to be any confusion of the 1 to 3 to 5. So anywhere
sorry.
from
Yes,
1
I was
to 5.
hopping around. It could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
An average, and if you have anything that falls outside of those averages, reach out and let us know. We want to talk about it. We, our guardrails are just to provide parameters. They're not for us to then dictate to you what's the best way to approach addressing the need that you have identified.
Yeah, thank you. A question from Julie came in. If a multi-year project, should budgets be based on a 1-year cycle with subsequent years, since the full future of funding is unknown at this point? And I think also it might be good information to share that the full budget wouldn't come until stage 2.
Correct. So what we are asking, thanks, Hannah. You can answer this question too if you would like. But the budget information that we're asking for at this point in time in this stage is really the overall budget for the full period of time you are requesting. So it's not asking for you to necessarily denote what that would be each year. So what I hear you asking in that question, that depending, you might have be requesting for 3 years, $300,000. But if you were actually looking at the budget on an annual basis, your first year you might be asking for 200,000, and the subsequent years you're asking for 50 and 50, right? You don't have to specify that at this stage. You would just say you're looking for $300,000 for 3 years to high level state what you're looking to do with that funding, or what that funding would support.
Thank you. If we have an idea and want or need a partner organization with whom to collaborate, can the Health Foundation refer organizations to each other, as well as, let's start with that.
Yeah, so, we're not in the business of, forcing folks necessarily to partner with one another, although it is something that we encourage and support. However, we do see ourselves as being in a position at times to be able to introduce folks, to bring attention to opportunities. So from that perspective, if someone is interested in potential partners, please feel free to reach out to us. share with us what your thoughts are, what your needs are. And if we have the ability, the knowledge to, we are more than happy to make what sometimes one of our colleagues call, these introductions to maybe coffee dates that maybe sometimes lead to, more formal partnerships.
Thank you. Do we have a guesstimate, or how many applicants do we anticipate will be invited to the second stage of the application process?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it gives me a brief opportunity to even just sort of go through the steps in the process and a little bit of information as to why. So, if you've had an opportunity to read through all the guidelines, you would have seen that we have a multi-stage process. The simple rationale behind that is to right size the time commitment, information needed, and increase the access and opportunity for all kinds of organizations to be able to submit the idea and get it in front of us, right? And so we start off with this stage one, which is now a 3-page single space, 6-page double space proposal that would be submitted, and those get reviewed, and then a subset of those are then selected and invited to stage two, where additional information is then asked of the organization. And then from there's a set of those that get moved forward to bring forward to our board, get recommended for funding, and then our board makes the final determination around funding. Hence the timeline around the process that's even shared on the last page of the guidelines. So, not knowing how many proposals we are going to get in, we are unable to say exactly how many would get invited to stage two, but from a percentage perspective, I would say about 25% then get invited, 20 to 25% get invited to stage two. We really try to make sure that we are um, asking for folks to commit their time and energy in ways that make sense. So we're not going to just casually say, well, oh, just give us more information to give us more information. We ask, we see something here, here's an opportunity, we need more information, we're going to move on to stage two, additional clarifications, and then make determinations from there. And I will say, and this is just a truth, I think, always, and I will speak to it from the call for ideas experience thus far. There are many more viable, needed, valid proposals, ideas, needs that get brought forward to us than we will ever fund. So even not getting an invitation to stage two might not have anything to do with how well the proposal was written, how much or how well the need was identified, or how legitimate it was. Because we are making decisions based on a variety of factors. So that's another reason why when we share thoughts and ideas with you, feedback with you, as well as even the design of the questions we've asked in the call for ideas, we have set it up in such a way that what you're sharing with us isn't really just geared for us, that it should be the kind of idea that you're shopping to us because we have this opportunity, but that would be something that you can share with others that might have a funding opportunity available as well. It's not so much, gated to just the needs of the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, but broader community needs. And so you're not just putting your time and effort into answering and, giving us what we're looking for, but more broadly highlighting and raising up and bringing forth a truth, a need, and saying, here, we're sharing this with you. Here's you're offering an opportunity, And if not us, then someone else.
I appreciate sharing that. Thank you. Before we hop into the next question, I did just want to point out, Chad had put in the chat, we are looking to partner with anyone who is interested in exploring opportunities for impacting economic mobility as it relates to the social determinants of health, with his direct email. So just wanted to make sure that folks saw that as a potential partnership, or even just an introduction conversation.
Thanks for pointing that out. And actually, Chad, there's somebody that comes to mind that we can talk offline about.
Yeah, thank you. How is the Health Foundation framing public health issues? Is that something that is included, or potential funding opportunities? Youth violence, structural racism, impact and physical neighborhood environment, gun violence, what we're so much seeing right now.
Absolutely. Right. So when we share that we take a social determinants of health view of our investment, and that we ascribe to the World Health Organization's definition of health being, a physical, emotional, and social state, right? And state of health, and not just the absence of infirmity, right? Like, we are talking about the very things that were noted in that question, right? So it's not just what might be easily identifiable as like the clinical needs that folks might have, or even some of the supportive basic needs, but taking a look at what are some of the systems, situations, circumstances that create those challenges, right? Such as systemic racism, gun violence, depending on how far back you're going into the causal factors, right? The systematic racism, has its link to the gun violence. You might also just be taking a look at, interrupting and addressing the gun violence. Like, so all of those things absolutely are within our investment focus thinking, as we do understand health from a public health perspective, a broad public health perspective.
Thank you. If an organization applies for the full funding amount, so $100,000 a year for the 5 years, will the foundation respond with an adjustment? So say $50,000 for a 3-year period, for example, or will the foundation reject the application if they believe the request is too high for the proposed project?
That's a great question. So actually, they've all been great questions, but that's a very nuanced one that doesn't always come up. So 2 aspects to that. One, regardless if it's $100,000 a year for 5 years, or if it was $25,000 a year for 3 years, we really try not to make adjustments to what you requested, right? We don't want to come back, at least definitely not adjust down, to come back to say, we would fund this, but we're only going to fund it for $10,000 a year for 3 years, because we respect that you are sharing with us a request amount based on what's needed to move the work forward. So that is a practice that we really, and I think have successfully kept to. In terms of asking for too much, we don't really have a way to determine that, because we're relying on you sharing that information with us. So I suppose, and please let me be clear on the fact that as we move forward, our equity focus and goals and practices, we are adapting and learning new things, and shifting as we go along. And if there was really a question that we had that we needed to have answered in terms of an amount, we would ask you that question before we would just eliminate it based on that.
Thank you. And I'm going to apologize in advance if my dog barks. He is, there it is. There it is. That's our remote environment. Of the 12 awarded previously, in cycle 2, can you share average years or average total cost? I will say, a part of this question is it available on our website anywhere?
It will be. We have not gotten to putting all of that up. Some of you might have noticed we have a new website that has been up now for a couple of months, and so we're still in the process of populating. So I will share with you that information. I actually printed it out to make sure I had it right here in front of me and that I wasn't going to do it off the top of my head. This time I'm including not only what we just supported in this past cycle, but in the full 2 cycles that we have awarded. We have awarded anywhere from 12 months to 60 months. I would say the largest percentage of awards have been somewhere in the 3-year range, but many are multiple year. We have many that are 5 years, many that are 4 years, right? So from that perspective, the lowest amount of grant was $60,000, and that was, no, I'm sorry, the lowest grant was 60,000. I take that back. We don't have any 12-month grants. I'm sorry. We so our lowest amount is 60,000 and our highest 60,000 for 2 years, and the lowest was, and sorry, that's the lowest. The highest was $500,000 for over 5 years. I feel like I'm missing something that I don't have all the information in front of me, because we do have a 1-year grant. I just can't remember who it's with and what the amount is. But I will.
I think what we can. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say we can make sure that is something we work on trying to get on the website sooner rather than later, so folks can have an idea of what we funded. Yeah, thank you. What we have funded, so that folks can see that information.
Yes, because in a couple of the conversations I've had, I've shared the kinds of projects that we have funded, and one of the things that folks are a little bit surprised about is the diversity. So in many ways, it wasn't necessarily helpful in understanding, like, yep, oh great, so now I know my idea is going to really be something that they're interested in. However, in hearing the diversity, they were like, oh, okay, so you are literal when you say that you are going across region, across area, population, need, etc. So we will definitely make sure that that is up very shortly.
Yes, thank you. We do have at least one 12-month grant that's 30,000. So that would be the lowest at this point that we have funded.
Thanks for using your memory.
I wish I could take the credit. So before we do hop over into the specific project program specific questions that folks might have, there was one other question that I wanted to bring up, Monica, and it's just talking a little bit about rural counties and understanding the health inequities in rural areas due to a lack of many resources that public health practitioners rely on, as well as, it was a general rural equity issue. So is that something that we fund? Have we funded it? Do we have a sense of understanding of what the rural equities are, and just talk a little bit about that?
Do you? Or do you want me to answer it? Okay. So, yeah. our rural communities, the investment in our rural communities are important to us as our investment in our urban, suburban communities are. One of the things that we are very conscious of is how we want to do better and do more within our rural communities. So, when I was talking about how we take a look at the full picture, that's one of the aspects of the full picture that we take a look at. What is our county spread here in our recommendations of what we have in front of us? Um, where are areas that we might not have had great penetration before with our investment that we want to increase our investment within? So, um, we are very committed to our rural counties and understand the unique challenge around accessing resources, especially since often what is looked at is not only need, but reach. And from a reach perspective, our rural communities may have, and not may, they have identical challenge and need, but don't have the same volume. And sometimes are put in an unfortunate position where it's, funding is so focused on, volume in terms of what's the maximum reach for these dollars that our smaller communities that don't have as much volume then can't be strong contenders of. That's not the way we're looking at things. We're not looking at volume in general. It's not just the number of folks you can reach, but it's how impactful and how included are the communities that you are serving in the design and in the work. So that's another way in which I feel that we are making effort to make sure that we lift up and make available funding for our rural communities, as well as is doing more and more outreach within our rural communities so our faces can be shown and we can be known so folks even know to reach out to us to ask for funding. So the short answer is we're absolutely committed to our rural communities. The long answer is we know we have continued work to do and that we are in the process of that. And the extended answer is, and this is what we're also doing as a way to make sure we're reaching our rural communities, is that is directly a part of our equity investment lens that we use when we're making decisions.
Thank you, Monica. And thanks to everyone who not only submitted questions prior, but also, put some questions in the chat for us. So it is 11:05.
Before we move on to our next portion, right? And I will share, and Hannah's going to be facilitating this. Don't feel, we are asking for folks to stay and join the second portion as they feel that they would have benefit. Right? So we're not forcing, don't feel like, oh, it'll be awkward if you don't stay for this second half. We recognize some people wanted the general Q&A, and the second part might not be as much, may not be as relevant to you or beneficial for you, and we respect that. We actually are testing this out for the first time to see if it is something that is useful. But before you leave, if you are, don't go anywhere because there is a very important person for you to meet. Kristen Rabanik is our grants manager. She is someone who I would like to have introduce herself, and she is another key team member that you will most likely during some point in this process, or if you are then awarded with us, that you will have contact with, and this is an opportunity for you to see her and hear her voice.
Hi, I am the Grants and Finance Manager here at GRHF, and I look forward to working with everybody. We have lots of different things going on, and I look forward to being able to work with everyone on budgets when it gets to that point. And I'm also the point of contact for our portal. So anytime that you have any issues or you're trying to register with our portal, you can contact me. My contact info is all over our website and our portal site as well. When we eventually get to the budget pieces, I am your point of contact in that as well, and can answer any questions that you folks might have. And yeah, you can, don't hesitate to contact me.
Thanks, Kristen. And, we put our contact information all over the document in multiple places on purpose. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And we rather answer the question, talk it through, than to have you feel that you have to guess at it.
And I did just see that Christine put my email address in the chat, so please feel free to save that. And like I said, just don't hesitate to reach out for anything. It's easier to answer a question than to have anybody feel like they're stuck. So.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. So now I think it's okay to transition to project and program specific related questions. Again, please feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to, unmute yourself and ask questions, raise your hand, however you want to dive right in. And if not, I have a couple of tips that I can go through first so people can think about it. But Chris, I saw that you unmuted if you have something.
Yeah, I'm always comfortable going first if it's fine with everybody else. So good morning, thanks for having us. The first thing I wanted to ask might be more general purpose as well. I would consider mine a pretty small organization. We're under $100,000 budget, but I think the most appropriate ask would be around that much for each of a couple of years. Like, is that red flag for you guys? Like, I know a lot of times foundations don't want to be the bulk of an organization's budget.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So it is not a red flag for us. It is something that we consider, and when we're looking at, I would say in relation to the capacity, if it's, if what you're asking, can you, do you have the capacity within your organization to do that? As well as, one of the things which I believe we're putting some information on our website is we are wanting to share with our community partners, specifically nonprofits, around tipping, which, we can have an offline conversation, but that is for folks who are unaware, it's where penalties can happen and your 501c3 status can, potentially be impacted if you do receive too much of your funding from one source over a span of, I believe it's 5 years. And we're just exploring, just learning about it ourselves. And so we are aware of that and just wanting to share that with our community partners, but it isn't something that would impede, our decision. It's not something that we look at.
Okay. So as long as we demonstrate capacity and can explain that, and I'm not worried about that. Particularly, we're partnering with a chunk of the URMC, but I think that it makes more sense for us to be the lead applicant than them. So our lead applicant status will look like a much smaller budget than if it was the URMC.
Right.
But they will have some clinical support, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So then also, and Monica, I think you just kind of addressed this, the population size, the number of people directly impacted is not a significant concern for you as long as we're demonstrating the severity of the situation and some of the other content that you described.
Correct. It isn't, and I think you can see on the selection considerations, that isn't a question that we, those considerations that we have on the call for ideas are what we give our reviewers, both internal and external as well. So those are, what we're thinking about, and the amount of people you're serving isn't something that is a weighted piece. It's part of the project, or it's part of the picture. It's part of, the full picture. But it isn't, again, it's not going to impact whether you're funded or not. Again, you want to think about right sizing what your ask is, what your needs are, but it's not a weighted consideration.
Okay. And within that population that I'm talking, so it's spinal cord injury,
Yeah.
which doesn't happen a lot, but it's prevalent enough. And like certainly for the folks that happens, it's a serious issue. But there is a significant overlay with some of the other intersectionalities we were talking about. It happens more often to young Black men because of violence. We recently started specifically a survivors of violence paralysis group. Elderly folks, not more common, but where I'm looking at pressure sore prevention, like, it's more common as you age, it's more common if you don't have good nutrition. So there is a lot of overlay with, some of the intersections you're talking about. And I guess my last question is, do you want to see or do you want to not see research as part of this?
I think with acknowledging the space, the space limited that we've asked, we leave it up to you. If it is something that is part of your ask, is part of what you want to share, please feel free to share it. We would love to see it and to read it. But I would also just, again, be aware of the spacing that we are asking for this stage one, and being able to answer all the questions within that spacing.
Okay, I worded my question poorly. Do you fund research? Like the topic that we're looking at, there is a little bit of existing research, but mostly like we want to contribute to sort of the body of knowledge. Is that fundable through this request, or do you want to see more of just program intervention in this request?
Monica, I'm gonna pass that question to you, just because it's not something we have officially talked about.
Yeah, no, we haven't officially talked about this. But I would say that, we're not a funder of research, right? So, something that is just about research is not typically something we would fund. But I say that with like, well, we would need to talk about it. And the question about research, is it about digging deeper to find out information that we really need to know to then improve how we provide services? Or is it research because we want to justify and verify and prove, right? So that's a different slant on the research, right? So one of the things, Chris, you did so well is to talk intersectionality and the layering around an issue, right? You're like, spinal cord injury, knowing that in and of itself, you could say that population, that there is an equity issue and challenge. And then you went deeper and said, and we also know that this is something that, also has a racial cut across it when we talk about our young men of color, and also that layer of, so seeing all of that together is a really strong perspective and understanding of the issue of equity and intersectionality. So not knowing enough about this area, is the research about because we want to make sure we fully understand the best ways to co-design with folks our solutions, or is it to prove and show that this works, right? And so it really just depends on how you're thinking about it and where your resources are going. And is it possible that you could be doing more without even having that other information? So in terms of meaning, like, do you need the research to do the work, right? Because we would be most supportive of the work, but
Yeah.
it's not to the exclusion of not respecting and understanding research, because we have lots of evaluation that we've supported with some projects
Yeah.
because there was a purpose to it that helped towards the impact.
Yeah. So this might be something for me to flesh out a little more, and we can talk separately, because I mean, we can definitely do work. I think that, there's a lot of work to be done in the area. I think we have a good enough idea to do that work, but I think that, for the good of a broader community to have sort of an evaluation, control group, I don't know exactly, but that I think there's a lot to learn to teach others, from whatever we experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would, to you, Chris, of course, and to folks on this call, if you do have questions or want to be able to, talk ideas through, please don't hesitate to reach out to Monica or I, because we are available and want to have conversations. So this by no means does this need to be the only time we talk. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. Do we have any other specific program or project related questions for your individual ideas? Yeah, Kim, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kim Wolf, and I represent the Children's Agenda, and this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so you'll have to excuse my ignorance.
Yeah, welcome. Glad you're here.
I'm just sort of stepping in last minute here for, I'm administrative assistant, and I'm stepping in for our CEO, which is kind of funny. So, my question to you is that we have 4 different areas that we are in need of funding for. And I'm having a tricky time trying to flesh out which one is, I mean, they're all great. One is a position that we need filled, okay, that we had filled before, but we need the funding to fill this position, which is an ongoing position. Another is having to do with the city school budget and where that money is being allocated to, and making sure that those buckets are being filled appropriately, and standing by and doing all of these great things with this. Another one is a child care advocacy with parents and child care, and how that is all connecting, and details and data on that. But then we have a 4th one that is a wonderful one too, which has to do with pre-K and transition, helping children to transition from pre-K to kindergarten in every area, and working with parents in focus groups and finding out what was happening with them and where they were coming from, especially during this COVID, where your children are now, how are we going to get them to kindergarten? Where is all this information going to, and how we can get this information out to those people who make these policies and decisions. So I have these 4 buckets that I love. So the question to me is, which one of these do I talk with you separately? Which one of these really fits what you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing the information on the 4 buckets. And I'll share it in relation to more generalized for folks who have, more than one idea. And then of course, if what I say doesn't help you narrow at all, please feel free to connect with us offline so we can have a deeper conversation. But I want to first start out by saying, I'm not sure, Monica, I don't believe you did the timeline of when and how it looks. I know it is on the call for ideas, but in relation to when the funding would be available, as that might be one piece and one aspect of what your needs are within the 4. So the call for ideas is open until June 11th. With the idea that we would bring recommendations to our October board meeting. With that, funds would not be then released until sometime in November. If all of the signing and grant agreements go accordingly, and because we have Kristen on board now, they have been in that direction. But so timing wise, again, funding probably wouldn't be available until November of this year. As well as when you're looking at, for your 4 different ideas, I think there's a couple of things to think about. I would say looking at, the partnerships and the community voice, and also readiness, looking at the timeline of when the funding is available. Is one project over the other more ready, in a place that you do have the community voice, that you do have the partnerships in place? Again, looking at the populations, is there, a population that is in need, I would say immediate needs or services, or, being more marginalized or experiencing those biggest inequities? So it's kind of looking at all of those aspects and, in relation to your projects of, okay, is this one ready? Do we have community voice in this one? So looking at the considerations and trying to narrow out and see which one is, which one comes on top for this funding at this point. And again, please feel free, that was a very generalized comment, but please feel free to reach out so that we can have a deeper dive if that's helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and that was really a comprehensive answer. And to just build on it slightly, and not just specific to your question, Kim, is the idea that, on one hand, we are looking for something, right? Because we do have our health focus and our equity focus and our emphasis on shared design and co-creation with community. However, we would say it's not what we are most interested in seeing. It's what you then recognize as the most pressing issue based on your positioning within the community around that issue, right? Like, so you should know and learn and have the most information about it because of your relationship with the community and your relationship and knowledge working within that area. So you would be telling us, right? So you could look at it from like, what sort of, comes to the most what becomes highlighted then, thinking about it from that perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
If that helps any further.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions at this point?
I do have a question.
Sure.
Hi, Carolee Fennessy. I'm from Endless Highway. So my question has to do more with, hi Monica, more with like the structuring of our request. So we have this overall goal that we have been working towards, and we've already begun our work for the past year, and that's deepening our equity work beyond just individuals with disabilities into specifically individuals with disabilities who face that intersectional inequity. So communities of color, low-income families, folks facing poverty, all of those are very closely related. We have the research to support that, that families who are low income are going to be more likely to have an individual with a disability, and they definitely affect each other. So what I'm not sure about is, ideally we want to spend more time doing this city outreach, doing the trainings we're doing with the city of Rochester, doing the co-designing we're doing with the schools that we're specifically working with in the city and the art centers that we're specifically working with. This co-design that is important to us and that we're already doing is so important, but there's no revenue stream for it because we're doing this to create that trickle-down effect for our community. We're doing it so that any kid in any community in the city of Rochester can walk into an art center and feel welcome there and be supported there. So when we're requesting funds, what we're really saying is we want to continue doing this work, but we don't want to bleed out our resources doing it because this is not a revenue source. So do we ask for a quantified portion of the position to be covered? Or one thing that we're throwing around was saying, well, if we hired a part-time staff to do the revenue stuff, to do the donor engagement, the donor management, making sure that we're getting that where we do have revenue is still coming in. So do we hire this separate person and ask for funding for their position so that I can do the non-revenue stuff? Or do we build it into my salary? And that's kind of where we're stuck.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to ask Monica to chime in as well. My first thought, my first inkling, feeling, whatever that first is because of the focus areas that we're trying to reach within this call for ideas. I would probably recommend focusing on that outreach, focusing on that work. And whether it's building it into your salary, or, you know, if it is looking at operations, like an operating grant, because you know that there's need for your salary, as well as you're showing a need for building who you have on your organization, so that you have the capacity within your organization to do all of that work. That's an option too. So that's my first feeling. But that's also just, you know, hearing your question right then and there without having processed that. So Monica, what was your first feeling?
Yeah, to be honest, my first feeling is like, oh, I want to maybe talk with you one-on-one a little bit and like dig deeper, or even see your proposal, the first draft of it, and then give feedback. Because as Hannah already expressed, and this is for anyone on the call who may be in a similar position, it really depends. We have a little bit of an advantage with your question, because we know a little something about your organization, which gives us some insight that might be beneficial, because we know of some work that you've done within different spaces. But again, and this is similar to what Kim was talking about, how you structure it, think about it based on what would be the best way to structure it, the ask, the request, to move you toward the direction that ultimately you know is aligned with our health and equity goals. That's the top part. Then what you need to support it, the resources, really just undergirds and supports that. So really you might be, you know, thinking about like, and expressing the specifics about like, what is it that you are looking to do and the hows, and then what are the resources it'll take to do it. Because you're a smaller entity, you're not talking about a large staff and a big infrastructure. So, you know, we might, you know, talk through the opportunities with you, or the way you might look at it a little differently. And to Hannah's point, you know, it might mean that it's an operating grant, but it might not. It might be more programmatic in nature, and then it frees up some of your other funds to do the other pieces that you have to do operationally. So let's talk through it a little bit more, maybe even as you guys formulate your idea a little bit more. Then, you know, you can present something to us, and that's something that we do offer. If you have your draft, you can share it with us and we can review it. We just say, if we get 100 of them a week out, we might not be able to get to all of them, but that is something that we have offered up, and some people have taken us up on, and we have provided feedback.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will definitely be taking that opportunity, because that is unique. Not every funder does that. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, our goal around that is also because, you know, like I said before, our goal is not just to sort of support you in being able to present something viable to us, right? It's about how can we help inform as much as possible, share thoughts and ideas to just sharpen the work, right? To sharpen the opportunity, to increase the likelihood of something that's a need being addressed. So that's one of the reasons why we do that. And we don't want lack of communication to be the reason why something's not understood fully.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Any other questions? Amy, sure.
First of all, thank you so much for this. It's a really wonderful opportunity to learn, and I have no doubt, and I said this to you, Hannah, previously when we were in real time in person when you've done these, that my assumption is that every single organization that's coming to the table with an idea has something fabulous, and it's just going to be better for our community overall. We want to make sure that, like everybody else, we present the most robust version of our idea to you. And my concern for what we're doing with Rochester Hearing and Speech Center with our Dynamic Baby project is in the end, I think it would be fantastic if we had lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of partners for what we have planned. Currently, we do not. Pre-COVID, we shared our idea with a number of different groups and got very positive feedback about it. And then because of circumstance, we haven't been able to talk about it again. However, we know that in the smallest nutshell, the Dynamic Baby program is the companion piece to the Back to Sleep program that prevents SIDS. So Dynamic Baby is the piece that parents need to know about so that they can properly position their child when they're awake. And the pieces that our physical therapist who has developed this program shared with me, that I then shared with all of the pregnant and new parents that I knew, were altering how they handled their baby. So I guess I wanted to get a sense from you, while we want to give you this for June 11th, and there's many components of it that we have, including the marketing piece, because we believe that the more parents that know that this is even a thing, the better they can help their baby and have an impact on their life forever, to classes that we can offer, to partnership opportunities with agencies across Rochester so that they can share that information. So as we're working on it, I just didn't know the best way to give you the right picture of how we're moving forward, because there's a number of streams and avenues that we could go down to make sure that this information gets to where it needs to go. We're also scheduling time to visit with parents so that we're not creating this in a vacuum, so that we're figuring out from them and getting feedback from them how it's going to be most helpful. We don't want to assume anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of talking, but I hope my question got in there too, which is, when it's so big like that, I guess, how can we best present to you what's needed by June 11th?
Yeah, by June 11th, right. That is a great question. And I would probably invite a conversation offline to learn a little bit more and to help you, well, tell you, one, for us to understand and to have a better understanding of what your needs are and what the needs are for, the families, but also similarly the structure of what might be, the best things to present, to highlight, because it is, we know that this stage one is a high level summary, but you also want to make sure that you have, all of the right information in there so that it is a full picture. Yeah, so I would definitely invite a conversation beyond this.
So we'll just set that up.
Yeah, we'll set that up. I do also want to just share with everyone, one of the, the best grant writing tips that I can share and that we can share, is when you're writing your proposal, try to write it as if you're having a conversation. We find that talking with folks, we learn so much, that it's shared more easily through a conversation. The flow just seems to be easier than, trying to write it down. So if you keep that in mind and, say you're having a conversation with myself or with a colleague, maybe jot down what it is that you're saying and is that included, or is that important? Should that be included? And I would also, for anyone, especially because we did try, to be more transparent this cycle and share the selection considerations that we look at when reviewing. For someone who is not, in the work, because it's hard to separate and see that. For someone who's not in the work, maybe ask them to review and read the proposal, so that if there's any big questions, because they're not in the work, they might come up. And then that might be, an area of, okay, we didn't address that enough and we need to emphasize that or heighten that, or, oh, maybe that's not relevant, and take that out. But but to have another eye on it, because it's so easy. Like we see this every day. We know what's in it. We know what we're talking about. So it must be obvious to other people, and that's not always the case. So to get that other eyes perspective is really beneficial as well. But Amy will definitely set something up offline.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. All right, I know we're dwindling down a little bit here, and timing wise also, but just again wanted to open it and see if there's other questions for folks that they might have in this opportunity. And if not, that's totally fine. Also, again, you have our the ideas at the grhf.org as an option to send questions to, as well as you have Monica and my information too. So we're always available as well. All right. Anything you want to wrap up with, Monica?
I will say, please just review all of the guidelines and supportive information. It will provide, really a lot of guidance, literally, is in there and can really help with sorting through some of your thinking. And just saying again, the human-centered design workshop is next Friday. We do still have some spaces there. What's nice about learning about human-centered design, it gives you some tools and perspective and thinking, ways of thinking about how we can be in partnership with community, how we can include community in design, excuse me, being at the table together, working together, and importantly, how do we also gain greater insight, right? Not only as providers, but even as individuals, because sometimes, direct questions doesn't always provide the deepest insight and understanding as to what is actually going on and what actually might be the real problem, and then thus providing the best opportunity to start with thinking of solutions. So human-centered design is one of those techniques that, once something you can replicate, there are tools to it, and also offers you up a new way of thinking. So if you have any questions about it, please feel free to reach out. There's a lot of, click here and you can see some easy information to educate yourself with. And the registration for the training that will be next Friday is right in the guidance document. That too will be recorded and placed on our website if you're not available. So the tools will still be there and available to you. And that workshop is from 10:30 a.m. to noon next Friday, the 21st. And I would close with thank you for your time, and sort of walking through this with us as well. We don't know what to expect. Our goal is to make sure that we're clarifying things, allowing for the communication of the needs to be easier and clearer for you. And we hope that we were able to achieve that for you. And it's also nice to see faces, some familiar, some new. And like Hannah mentioned, if you have any questions that come up after you go back and talk to your colleagues and the rest of the team about the conversation today, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.